So yesterday we left off in the middle of section 10.2. We talked about finding an axis of symmetry and a vertex of a parabola. What is the shape of a parabola?
U-shape.
It's a U shape, or it could be an upside down U shape. Y'all are so smart. Oh my goodness. How did I get so blessed with such a smart first block? Shout out to you guys. Anyway, so we learned about the axis of symmetry being a vertical line that goes through the center of our parabola, and the part where it touches the parabola is called the vertex. So x equals a number is a formula for a vertical line. And what is our exact formula for our axis of symmetry? I told you to memorize.
-b over 2.
Very good. X equals negative b over 2a. Now, where does b and a come from? Right, from your quadratic equation. A quadratic equation has the highest exponent is a what? A square, right? So here's our quadratic equation right here. So your a is your leading coefficient, your b is your middle term, and the last term is c, which is your constant. So before you even pick out your a and b, you write negative on top. Now what is your b? It's a -6. So yes, I have negative. I'll fix that in a second. Over 2 times what is our a? 3. Very good. And then we simplify -6 is a +6, right? And 2 times 3 is +6. And 6 divided by 6 equals what? 1. We don't just say 1, we say x equals 1 because it's an equation of a vertical line. So we plug in our a and our b into negative b over 2a and simplify that fraction. So any questions about how we got our line for our axis of symmetry? So do y'all remember from yesterday how we got the vertex then? Right, you plug your x into all the x's in your quadratic. Now the vertex, what does the answer of a vertex look like? It's an ordered pair, it's a point. So you need an x and a y when you're done. So yeah, we got the x already, it's gonna be 1. So we're gonna plug 1 in for all of our x's. So y is gonna equal 3 times 1 squared minus 6 times 1 plus 3. Exponent before you multiply. 1 squared is 1. 3 times 1 is 3. -6 times 1 is -6. And then you add 2. And then we can add and subtract all at the same time. 3 minus 6 is -3 plus 2 is what? -1. So what's the ordered pair for our vertex then? 1, -1. All right. So that's going to be the lowest point on our parabola. The way I know it's going to be the lowest point is because my a term is a positive. So if my a term is positive, it's going to be a U shape, not upside down. So you look in front of the x squared to see if you're going to be a U or an upside down U. So after I've got my vertex, you can go ahead and start working on the graph a little bit. So draw your x and y axis, please. Look how straight my lines are. That's like perfect, and I would never do that again. Lucky. All right. So for your axis of symmetry, you're going to make a dotted line. It says x equals 1, so you're going to cross the x-axis at 1. So you go to 1 on the x-axis and make a dotted vertical line. Because it's not really part of the parabola, but it helps us to see what the center of the parabola is supposed to be. And then the vertex should be on that dotted line. So then you graph the point 1, -1, write 1 down 1, and it is. The vertex should always be on the axis of symmetry. I always do. I just write a V. AOS. So that doesn't look like a parabola, does it? It's only got 1 point on it. So to make a parabola, we need 3 at the very least, 3 points. So what you want to do, this is where people get confused on what to do on these. So after you graph your vertex, you pick an x value. And you want it to be close to your axis of symmetry. We're not going to choose 1 because we've already used 1. But something close to your axis of symmetry and something close to 0. So I would not go 2 spaces away from your axis of symmetry. I would not go more than 2 spaces. I wouldn't go 3 spaces. So you can pick an x value. Since 0 is just 1 place away, let's let x equal 0. 0 is easy to do arithmetic with. And then you plug that x value into all of your x's in the equation. So y equals 3 times 0 squared minus 6 times 0 plus 2. Well, that makes 0 and that makes 0. So 0 plus 2 equals what? 2. So the point 0, 2 is a point on our parabola. So you graph the point 0, 2. That's a point on our parabola. Now, what does the axis of symmetry mean? It's the same thing on both sides. So if I have 1 point here, 1 space away from the axis of symmetry, I got another point 1 space away in the other direction, don't I? So that's how you graph your third point. And then after you graph your third point, I want you to make your U shape, put arrows on it, and you're done. So after you graph your vertex and your axis of symmetry, then you pick an x value that's close to your axis of symmetry but not equal to it. Okay? And then if 0 is close, I pick 0. Then you plug that number and get your other point and then go the same number of spaces away and graph another one. Okay? That's it. Let's do this one. What are we going to start with? What do we have a formula for? The axis of symmetry. So always start with your axis of symmetry. What's the formula for our axis of symmetry? Oh, it's not just negative b over 2a. X equals negative b over 2a. Yeah, the x is important because that tells you it's a vertical line. X equals a number is a vertical line. So equals a negative, and then what is my b? Negative 8 over 2 times what's my a? 2. Then I simplify. What's negative? Negative 8. Positive 8 over 2 times 2 is 4. And 8 divided by 4 equals 2. So my axis of symmetry is x equals 2. So any questions about how we got the axis of symmetry? All right, then what do we find? Vertex. How do we get the vertex? Right, we plug 2 in for all of our x's in the quadratic. So y equals 2 times 2 squared minus 8 times 2 plus 7. Make sure you do your exponent first. So what is 2 squared? What is 2 squared? 4, okay. So, and then I can multiply. So 2 times 4 is 8. And then negative 8 times 2 is negative 16. And then plus 7. What's 8 minus 16 plus 7? Negative 1. So what ordered pair is my vertex? 2, negative 1. Okay. So after you get your vertex, you can start working on your graph. This time, my x-intercept, or my x-axis, no. My vertical line crosses the x-axis at what number? So I go to 2 and drop a vertical line, make it dotted because it's not part of the parabola. but it's important. And what's my vertex? So I go right 2, down 1. Make sure you're on your dotted line, because if not, something is wrong. All right, now this is where everybody forgets what to do. Does anybody remember what to do?
You gotta find another number.
Pick another x, right? So if I were y'all, here's 2. I would pick either 1 or 0. Which one do y'all want to pick?
0.
Raise your hand if you want to pick 0. Raise your hand if you want to pick 1. Oh, the 0 is 1.
Yeah.
So here's why I like 0. Because if I multiply anything times 0, I get what? 0. And 0 minus 0 plus 7 equals 7. And that was really quick to get that point, wasn't it? The only downside about it is it was 2 spaces away, which means it's going to be even bigger. Does that make sense to graph? So there's pros and cons to everything. So 0, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I did have enough room. So how many spaces away is that point from the dotted line? 2. So I go 2 in the opposite direction, and there's my 3rd point. And after you have 3 points, you can make a U shape, put arrows on it, and there's your parabola. That one was actually pretty good. Is that vertex a highest point or a lowest point? A lowest point. We're going to talk about those in a minute. So the vertex is either always the highest point or the lowest point, depending on if you have a U shape or an upside down U shape. So any questions about how we're graphing these? We good? It takes a while. It takes a while. I ain't going to lie. We haven't done a... Put a negative in front of that. Let me test it, make sure it's not crazy. We haven't done a negative, and I want a negative. Oh, yeah, we can handle this. All right. So, what's the first thing we do? Axis of symmetry. What's the formula for that? Good. So negative, what's our B? 4 over 2 times what's our A? Negative 1. So that's going to be negative 4 divided by negative 2, which is what? Positive 2. So x equals 2 is our axis of symmetry again. How do we get the vertex? Plug in 2 for all of our x's in the equation. So y equals negative parentheses 2 squared plus 4 times 2, I meant, plus 2. Now, okay, y'all, this negative in front of this parentheses means negative 1 times that. Do y'all see that? Negative x squared means negative 1 times x squared. So sometimes it helps us a little bit if we just stick that 1 between that negative sign and those parentheses. So 2 squared is what? 4. 4 times negative 1 is what? Negative 4. Always do exponent first. And then plus 8 plus 2. What does that equal? It's 6, isn't it? So my vertex is what ordered pair? 2, 6. And make sure you put parentheses around your ordered pairs. All right, then we make our graph. It's got to at least be able to go up to 2, 6. But is this one going to be a U shape or an upside down U shape? Upside down. How do you know? because the a term is negative. So 2, 6 is going to be my highest point, right? So it's okay that it's at the top of my graph. So I'm going to go to right 2, and there's my dotted line because x equals 2 is my axis of symmetry. Are we all good with that? And then 2, 6 is on that line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's going to be my highest point. It's going to be going upside down. Somebody pick an x value for me. 0 looks good to me, right? I would pick 0 or 1. Let's see 0. Let x equal 0. So y is going to be negative 0 plus 4 times 0 plus 2, which will just be 0 plus 0 plus 2, which is what? 2. So 0, 2 is a point on my parabola. Here is 0, 2. Y'all tell me how I find my third point. Right. I'm 2 spaces away from the dotted line here, so I go 2 spaces in the other direction. So however many spaces away your last point was, that's how many spaces you go in the other direction to get your third point. And then we're making an upside down U shape this time. Put arrows on it, and there's your parabola. Okay, so this time our vertex was at the top of our graph. So any questions on how to graph a parabola using axis of symmetry and vertex? So yesterday we graphed parabolas using tables, but all of them, the vertex was on the y-axis, weren't they? Every one of them. So that's the difference in today and yesterday. Yesterday's all the vertex was on the y-axis. Today they're shifted over somewhere else. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is talk about the vertex a little bit more. And we're actually done drawing graphs. These are just little sketches. So if y'all are at the end of a piece of graph paper, you don't have to get out another piece of graph paper. You can get out notebook paper for the rest of the lesson. Next thing we're going to practice doing is determine whether the vertex is a maximum or a minimum. We've already kind of talked about this a little bit. If the a term, now what is the a term? The term that's with the what? X squared, yeah. If the a term is a positive, we have a U-shaped parabola, right? It's U-shaped, not upside down. So if we have a positive a term, we have a U-shape. The vertex is down here at the bottom, and it's the lowest point on the graph. That is called a minimum. So if the vertex is the lowest part of the graph, we call it a minimum. If we have a negative a term, a negative in front of our x squared, then we already know that's an upside down U shape. Therefore, the vertex is at the top of the graph, making it the highest point on the graph. And so therefore it is called the what? Maximum. So if you have a U-shaped graph, the vertex is a minimum. If you have an upside down U-shaped graph, the vertex is a maximum. So if your a term is positive, you'll have a minimum. If the a term is through my stylus, if a term is negative, you have a maximum. Maybe it's so like, well, this one came from Malaysia, so maybe it's okay. It's working. $20 on eBay. Saved my day. All right, so what's going to happen is we should be able to tell if the vertex will be a maximum or a minimum just by looking at the equation, right? Obviously, we can tell it by looking at the graph, but we should be able to tell it just by looking at the equation. So it says it wants us to find the maximum or the minimum value. If something asks you to find the maximum or the minimum value, that is the y value of the vertex. So if somebody says, what is the minimum value? That's the y value of the vertex. Okay? So here's my equation. This lovely little quadratic right here. Y'all tell me, what kind of parabola is this? Is this going to be a U-shaped parabola or upside down U-shaped parabola? Upside down. So its vertex will be a what? A maximum. It will be the highest point on the graph. Sometimes it helps me if I see that and I just draw a sketch of what the parabola looks like. Okay, it's on the top. It's a maximum. Right? So just draw you a little sketch of a cute little parabola. So you know it's going to be upside down, so it's a maximum. Because sometimes I get max and min confused because I think a term positive, that's bigger, it needs to be a maximum. But that's not true. It's actually the opposite. So if we want to find the maximum value, which means I told you that's the y value of the vertex. How do we find the y value of the vertex? What do I have to find first? You have to find axis of symmetry first. And what's the formula for that? Very good. So I say negative 12 over 10 times what? And I can that. What's negative 12? Positive 12. And 2 times negative 3 is what? Negative 6. And 12 divided by negative 6 is what? Negative 2. So x equals negative 2 is my AOS. I'm not graphing this. I just want to find what the maximum value is. So I want to find the highest point of the graph. So I'm looking for the y value for the vertex. And how do you get that? Plug in your AOS in for all your x's. So y equals negative 3 times negative 2 squared minus 12 times negative 2 plus 10. Order of operations comes first. So what do I do first in this simplifying? The exponent, right? So what's negative 2 squared? 4. And what's negative 3 times 4? Negative 12. And then negative 12 times negative 2 is what? Positive 24 plus 10. And y'all add and subtract all the way across. What is it? 22. So the maximum value, the highest part of this graph is going to be 22. So you would say 22 is the maximum value. And if you abbreviate, that's fine. Just give me 3 letters, not just one, because they both start with an M. So the highest part of this parabola will be at negative 2 and positive 22, which is off of my graph paper. So if they ask you for a maximum or minimum value, that's what you do. Axis of symmetry, pop it in, do it like you do the vertex, and whatever the y value is that value. Okay? Is that good? You want to graph that? Be my guest. All right. I'm not going to make you do all of this, but I'm going to talk about it for just a second. This equation, we're talking about this one. Is it going to be a U-shaped parabola or an upside-down U-shaped parabola? Yes, the 2 is positive. It's a U-shaped parabola. So the vertex is where? At the bottom, so it's a minimum. And if you wanted to find the minimum value, how would you do that? Find the axis of symmetry, and then you would do what after that? Plug those in for all your x's, and then get your y value for your vertex, and that would be your minimum value. Got it? Got it? Do we need to see it worked out, or are we good? Can we do it? We can just say we did it and we didn't. Okay. I do want to show you something simple really quick. Actually, I'm going to save it for tomorrow because I have a worksheet for you to do. So I'm going to stop the recording right now. Have a good day.